Good evening, and welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott, and tonight we'll be returning once again to the subject of the arts. So our guest tonight, a repeat guest, Susan Baushke from the Petite Opera, the executive producer of the operation, right?
Executive director, yes.
Executive director, yes. Chief honcho, I think,
Yeah.
right? Like big cheese?
Exactly.
Yes, all of that.
Exactly.
Right. We have Jerre Dye, who is the librettist, the writer for the latest production, which we'll get to in a moment,
Indeed.
The Rising and the Falling, right? And Cathy Dunn, the stage production, stage director. Yes.
Nice to be here.
So welcome all.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So nice to have you. So Susan, being the top dog, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about The Rising and the Falling. What is
The falling and
The
the
falling
rise.
and the rising.
We fall
Well,
first and then we rise.
Then we rise. Okay.
Yeah, so this is really, really exciting. So we've done 12 years now of different productions, and we always are looking for something that is really an experience beyond just entertainment. And so we're trying to connect with different audiences, because I think we've talked about that before. Our mission is to connect with a different audience for each show and kind of build the opera generation to come. This particular one is focused on military, and it's military and families and civilians. So it encompasses all of us, but it's telling stories that have never been told before, at least not in this format that I'm aware of.
So it's telling stories of veterans, right, who have returned. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's based on veterans or people who were active duty who have returned from deployment, and it's their stories. So
And it's largely in the Vietnam era, or is it
it's set
many?
set in modern day, but it relates to pretty much every generation and conflict that has been out there, because it's a constant story of what the struggles are that they go through.
Regardless of the war.
Regardless of the war, it's the emotional side, how they deal with different things like being separated from their families and losing members of their unit. All these things that are very universal to any military branch, really, although this particular opera is focusing on the Army.
And Jerre, you're more or less the creator of this piece, not by yourself. But
Yeah, it does take a village to make these kinds of things, right?
Yes,
It takes
yes,
lots of companies and lots of people. My primary collaborators are Zach Redler, who's the composer, and it's the brainchild of Sergeant Ben Hilgert, who is one of the most extraordinary people I've ever met in my entire life. He sings with the United States Army Field Band and Chorus. And I was at an Opera America conference about 7 years ago, and Ben walked in, and he saw a piece that I had created, and that piece that I created was based off of interviews with actual people, which
As opposed to interviews with dogs or
well,
inanimate objects.
instead of create a kind of whole cloth from the brain. One of the things I think opera is trying to do these days. Opera is a great
art
old
form.
tried and true tradition, right? But opera is trying to find new audience, right? We're trying to find a younger and younger audience and a more diverse audience than we've ever found before, because we have to, because that's what survival looks like, right? And Ben had this idea, like, what if we created an opera that told actual true stories from soldiers right now coming home, civilians, their families, and the connection between civilians and military service members. So he got me, the composer Zach Redler, together, brought us to Fort Meade, Bethesda, Walter Reed, and we had this amazing time interviewing soldiers over a course of many weeks, one week in particular.
These were all hospitals you just mentioned.
And also Fort Meade, Fort Meade.
Yeah.
So kind of all different walks of life, different people, different ages, different experiences, different ranks, collected stories, and then we all basically collaborated to see what can we make out of all these amazing, truly amazing stories and honest stories. Being in the presence of these folks, really just offering up their heart in the most incredible way. So it wasn't really difficult to come up with an arc. So we did. We created a story. Each character in the context of The Falling and the Rising is basically a composite sketch. So each single character could be made up of 5, 6, 7, 12 different interviews that we did over the course of several months.
So let me switch to Cathy. So you have to realize all this on stage, right? to make this all work.
Well, but it's so included and well written in the libretto. I was telling Sue earlier, it's been an easy show to direct in many ways because it's about their internal emotions, and it's almost more like directing a movie in many ways because it's so intimate and it's so personal. There's not a lot of action during the course of the show. We have one set for the whole show. It runs an hour, 20 minutes, something like that. And so it's about finding the truth in each of the performers and the authenticity of it and getting that across to the audience. Yeah.
And it sounds like, though, that was pretty straightforward because the stories are compelling.
Because the stories, yeah, it's all contained in and in the music that Zach wrote.
Which is beautiful.
Which is, it's beautiful. It's beautiful music.
It was also meant to be a first touch opera for many people.
What's first touch meaning? The
Meaning
first
like,
one they would see.
like many people, like we knew that even some of the people that we were interviewing, right? They were like, "What are you doing? An opera? What?
About war?
Awesome!
What?
I want to come see it." So knowing that in many cases the people in the audience, this is going to be their first time to even experience opera, and so that went into a great deal of care went into the construction of the opera along those lines, and also in the music. So a lot of musically, what you're going to hear are familiar, popular kinds of sounds that you might ordinarily not hear. And
now, this we talked a little bit before the show. This particular opera is being seen in many cities, right?
It is.
It's touring.
Yeah, it was initially a co-production between several different opera companies around the United States. Let's see, Opera Memphis, Opera Arizona, Seattle Opera, San Diego Opera, and Texas Christian University, and also some workshop, a gift of some workshop time from Siegel Music Colony in upstate New York. And those places are all going to have their own separate premieres with their own separate productions all over the United States. They've already started in some cases.
So, coming back to you, Susan, how did you encounter this opera? How did it manage to land with your company?
Well, as I said before, we were really looking for something that was more of an experience, and we were talking about the next season, and Kathy and I and Steve, who were the core board members. What are we going to do? Nothing's really jumping at me. It's like reimagining an old story. It's bringing forward another, opera that's been done forever, and we didn't want to go there. We wanted to do something fresh and new, like what Jerry was saying. And what is remarkable is he said first touch opera. I mean, that's what we do. We're trying to reach people who have never done it before. That's actually part of our key mission. So when Kathy was like, my friend Ben was creating this thing, and I saw the first reading of it at the Lyric Opera. I don't know, when was that? I don't know.
2016, maybe 17?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yes, and so he invited me because I had directed him when he was a very young man, both at Opera in the Ozarks and at Tulsa Opera in a production I directed there. And so he knew I was at Lyric, and so he invited me to come to the read and the workshop. Yeah. And I said, this is it. I
think this is it. Yeah.
This is it.
Exactly.
So you'd seen the production? Right?
No, I had just seen actors read the libretto.
Okay. So there was
and
no
it was
music yet.
That alone was so moving.
You remembered it.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, how do we do this? So let me get a hold of Ben. And so she started to contact Ben. She said, well, they're doing it in Memphis if you want to see it. And we're like, okay. So we got on a train and we took the city of New Orleans, and we went down to Memphis for the weekend and saw the final production of it in Memphis, where we met Jerry. And Ben had connected us with him, and just got immersed in the entire thing. There was so much going on there. It was kind of showcase for them for an entire week of different things. And we got to meet people that were in the show, and people who created the show, and the director, and the production staff, and hang around and have dinner with patrons. I mean, it was just really an amazing experience. And when we saw it, we were just totally unbelievable. I mean, this was like one of the most moving things we'd ever seen. And we turned at each other afterwards like, we're doing this. We're doing this. There is no doubt we're doing this. And I think just because there's so many so many people, especially like in the Chicago area, I know this is true all around the country, but there's such a big military presence here, and to connect them with their stories and remembering like grandparents and friends and my father and everybody that we've known that's been in the military, they never talk about what happened to them, ever. And one of the most moving things to me was they had what they call a talk back afterwards, which we're going to do as well. So the Jerry was on stage with their stage director, Ned, and many of the cast members, and one of the gentlemen said, I was in the Battle of the Bulge. Someone who was in the audience.
Right?
I was in the Battle of the Bulge. I have looked my entire life for something that told my story, and this is the only thing I've ever found that does. And that to me was like, we're doing this. I mean, it was just like reaffirmation all the time. Do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. When we did the interviews with people, when we asked soldiers, one of the questions that we ask is, what do you want civilians to know about your life, like what your life looks like, what it feels like, what you value. The word sacrifice comes up a lot, right? In regard to soldiers, but sometimes that word gets spoken so often it gets emptied out of its meaning.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
It loses, like, no, really, what does sacrifice look like? And here we were in these rooms with these amazing humans and hysterical humans with a great sense of humor and a great sense of joy and a lust for life, who are like going, look, here's the deal, and
so how did they open up to you, and particularly in what Susan just said, like so many veterans don't want to talk about it. How did you get them to open up?
Ask.
That was all it took?
No, it really, I mean, it's all, truly, it's ask. And that's part of the disconnect, right? Is that not just veterans, but what we learned with veterans and their families, there's this sense of isolation sometimes, right? And a sense of, there's a separation. And the whole point of the piece was, how do we build bridges between those two communities? And what happens with the show itself, hopefully, right, and the experience of also the sung experience, right, which is incredible, right, to hear, I'm going to hear my ideas and my thoughts summoned up
sung
inside
in beautiful
voice, right? It's with clarity and meaning and thought. And then afterwards, having this talk back and having this discussion. And also, what you guys are doing also with the Veterans Chorus too.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was done in Memphis as well.
So Kathy, did this intimidate you in any way, that you had to make sure that these really compelling stories made it out to the audience?
Of course it's challenging, but I feel like we're in a very unique position because our theater is so intimate to begin with. So having the small theater will put the performers right there in the midst of the audience, and I think the audience is really going to connect by being so close to the performers, just a matter of feet away.
Will this be on, I've been to your theater before in Park Ridge. Is it the same thing, with same theater, but there is a stage there, so.
Yes.
Right, so the production will take place on the stage, but because the audience is so close. in this
Right, and it's a
theater.
smaller theater and everything,
Yeah.
very
That's
very
its
intimate.
own gift, right?
Yes,
that
yeah.
experience.
Yeah. So were you looking for a place, Jerry? Were you looking for a place in Chicago to stage it?
The secret hope, right? You make an opera, you're alone in a room building a thing, right? Filled of dreams.
Right.
Will they come?
Yeah, right.
What was great about it being a co-production, knowing that it was going to have a life, was really, really great. But, we knew that those people were doing it, but knowing that it was going to have a life outside, you just don't know. So when they come along, and that's its own special gift.
I think we're the first ones outside of the originals.
Yeah, you're the first, and then after you
first
guys,
company,
there's a
right?
production in New Orleans is doing it, and I think it's slated also to be done in maybe even Alaska sometime soon.
Wow.
Alaska.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly.
Yeah.
You going to go up to Alaska to see it?
You better believe I am. Are you kidding?
Yeah, exactly.
I will say at this point, we were talking about this. We think by the end of next year, it is likely going to be the most produced new opera in the United States by the end of next year.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
exciting.
Which is incredible.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is
And
incredible.
it is. I take zero credit for that experience, but I believe that the piece has a bit of I always say it has some things that you create in your life. You're lucky enough they have a bit of a North Star, over them, and this piece just does, just because it's imbued with so many voices.
Well, yeah, and
So
I
much
was
heart.
going to say, because coming back to the stories, and I think what I hear is that the stories are so authentic,
Yeah.
That they're from the heart of people who've lived these experiences that most people, I would think particularly people who have never been in combat, me included, I've never been to war, but have no real concept of what that's like. And so to have that, have those people tell that story from the heart is what gives it the driving passion that it needs to make it work, right? Right.
And each one of these stories is just so incredible in itself. I mean, so when we did auditions, for instance, I mean, people started asking immediately, can I use this as an audition piece beyond this show? Because, you know, we're sharing this with them and it's all closed because it's copyrighted and protected, and they need to earn their money out of this. They've worked hard on it.
They did.
But it is such a full story of a person. Each one of them is like soup to nuts, an entire emotional vignette all by itself. And none of them are short. It's not like a Broadway musical 32 bar kind of, you know, shuffle off to Buffalo. This is exactly this person going from here to there, you know, and you're seeing the whole thing. You're seeing a woman talking to her daughter when she can't be there for her. You're seeing a woman dealing with survivor's guilt because her unit's gone. I mean, all these different things are really, really empowering, and they draw you in. I mean, this man is amazing. And the musical arc that Zach has in this is just, there's dissonance in this, so there's like conflict and there's tension, and then there's like this beauty, and it's just phenomenal. I just love it.
One of the greatest challenges actually has to do with exactly that, is that it's so moving that sometimes it's hard to not cry in rehearsal. The performers are also sometimes having a hard time holding it together while they're singing to get through the rehearsal. So part of our rehearsal process is just getting past,
getting
past the
tears.
crying.
Yeah, to be able to, and I think with enough repetition, you eventually become comfortable with it, right, or more comfortable with it.
I have singers texting me from time to time like, how dare you do this to me?
But we don't want to give the impression that it's a downer of a show.
No.
It's very uplifting.
It's a joyful show.
It's a joyful show. It's just so moving.
Well, you mentioned that so many of these veterans you talked to had wonderful senses of humor.
No.
Is there a way that comes through?
Crazy senses of humor, yeah. I can think of several interviews that I did. This is poignant, but it's also like this. It's not sad. It's incredible. There's this one soldier named Tyler. It was the first.
Actually, I don't mean to stop you, but I'm going to come back to that because I wanted to get to something before we do that and talk about. You mentioned something about recruiting people. And I want to talk about how you did the recruiting of people to come in and perform in this show.
So when we saw the Memphis show, that was, I think that was the first time that veterans were included in the chorus. Is that true?
Besides the U.S. Besides the Army.
The Army Field Band did it with active duty people in it, and then this was the first time that veterans had been doing it. And what we noticed was it was just amazing to see all these people up there coming from different backgrounds, because you had people from, you know, right out of latest conflict all the way up through Battle of the Bulge. I mean, on stage. There were like 24 people or something like that.
Veterans left from Battle of the
Not
Bulge.
a lot of them left, right.
Right.
But I mean, it spanned the entire time, and so you had all these smatterings of uniforms and things, and we're like, we have to have veterans in our show. So what we did is, as soon as we got the rights and said we were going to go on this, we went to the Ruck March, and we passed out postcards, and then we started sending out flyers to the American Legions and the VFWs, and we got in contact with a lot of veterans groups and said, hey, can you pass the word? Facebook was blowing up on this thing. How can we get people in? And we sent flyers to like veterans centers too. And so as a result of that, we've got people who are also asking their friends, and they're trying to get in. And so right now we have a core of veterans, and we would still be interested in taking on more if more wanted to join us at this point, even though we're already in rehearsal.
So there's a veterans chorus?
There's a veterans chorus. So they appear at the end of the show, and it's probably incredibly poignant because the lead soldier is a female, and she's she wants to go back home, and so she's like asking for help to do that, and the veterans all come, and it's this
like the
surround.
lane of
I mean,
hands,
it's surround, and it's all we are one, and it's just like this. Your chest is pounding, and your tears are flowing. And you're just like, I'm so proud I could just bust, And so during that course of that, we ended up getting a number of incredible veterans from across all the different conflicts, women and men, and it's really a joy to work with them. And so we actually brought one of our
veterans
one of
with
our
us?
veterans with us today, and his
Yes.
name is Ron Kobeluch.
And so through the magic of television, Ron has suddenly appeared on the set.
Hello there.
Ron, welcome to the show. Good to
Thank
have
you.
you here.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about your experience with the show. What drew you into it in the first place?
Well, I'd simply just retired from the VA. I'd been working there for 7 years, and I went by a veterans center, and there were the postcards there. Now, I'd actually come too late. I had retired at the end of April, and the auditions were over. But it looked so interesting. A veterans opera. And I've got a bachelor's degree in composing and arranging of music, and have sung with choirs for over 45 years. But I've never sung in an opera. And so it looked so interesting, I thought I'd call, and I'm glad I did. It's an excellent opportunity. You were just talking about the end of the opera, the veterans chorus. I see it as a different aspect also. There is something that veterans have. We have learned to help ourselves. You're never alone.
I mean, the community of veterans.
The community
you
of
help each
veterans
other, right?
help each other.
Yeah.
If there are stories, if there are problems, they talk to each other. And that, to me, is what the end of this opera does, is it lets the soldier know that they're not alone.
So tell us a little bit about your military experience as well. You served during Vietnam, right?
I did. I served on a destroyer escort, and I did 2 tours of Vietnam from 1970 and 1971. I did gunfire support. I did the loading up of river boats in the Mekong Delta. We did carrier duty in the Gulf of Tonkin and pulled pilots out of the drink when their planes were crashing. And as a destroyer escort, we also did all sorts of other duties in the Far East or in the South China Sea and so on.
So when you hear these stories, particularly as part of the cast now, or part of the chorus, I suspect that some of the memories are traumatic. And so as you hear these stories being sung in the course of the show, does that cause you any kind of discomfort? Do you have to relive things, or do you have to reconcile things somehow as you go through this?
Interesting. I feel the pain, but I've been feeling pain for a long time now. So when I feel it, I more or less said to myself that they're actually saying the right things. The different characters are bringing out different aspects of what veterans are running into. As the stuff I've seen in Vietnam veterans, talking about the situation itself, where one of the characters actually talks about what happened to them.
During the war, right.
During the war. One other character actually talks about as they're a jump master, or they're reminding the veteran or reminding the soldier that you're still a soldier. You still have ways to deal with things. The colonel at the end of one of the characters talks about the family. There's a returning soldier who talks about how he feels after it's over, and he's got no limbs. And these daily occurrences, sir. And all this touches on exactly what is going on in the veterans community now. That is why, in your case, you are actually healing a number of veterans rather than just the
So the stories are more than just the stories of the experience in war, right? These are experience after you've left and come back home.
Oh, yes.
And what happens as a returning veteran, right?
Without question, every single interview that we did had two streams
components?
that were happening all of the time. One was my family, my family, my family, my family. I don't know what I would do without my family, right? That was a constant, and how that support sustains me in a way that nothing else can. The other one was battle buddies. My battle buddies, my people, the people that I work with, the people whose lives are in my hands are, you can't imagine what that connection is. You know, you can't imagine what that feeling looks like. So hopefully those kinds of things made their way into every one of the individual stories.
And so do you feel, Ron, that these stories are as authentic as they should be, as someone who's really there, I mean, not just to participate, but also kind of to be a reality check consultant?
The way the opera is written touches on aspects of stories that almost all the veterans have. They have had the act that they still remember from the day it happened till the day they die, and returns all the time. This is what PTSD is caused by. They do remember their training that continues to tell them, and also when they get out, the VA or their friends tell them, you need to step up to this. You're backing down on this. And then, of course, the family at the end, when the colonel's talking, is real, because family is part of the healing process. And even those who don't have married family, or maybe their siblings and parents are gone, they have, as you said, battle buddies or friends who become part of their family.
So this, I like the idea that you talked about facing up. I mean, actually, that's part of it, is if someone's backing away or backing down, not acknowledging what they have to work with or what they have to face. It seems like that's part of the veteran process, and you mentioned its relationship to PTSD, right? So that seems like a theme that gets covered in this show as well?
You never hear the word PTSD, right? I think it's another one of those words that's like,
yeah,
let's talk about this, right?
It's overused.
Yeah. And well, the main character in the piece is the lead character, singer, is a female soldier. And during the course of the piece, she is actually inside a coma, an induced coma from a head trauma. And what we experience is essentially what happens inside that world that she is going through. Our first interview, or the first day I was telling you a little earlier, the first interview or the first day was this amazing guy, Tyler. I was nervous, right? I came like totally hat in hand, not knowing what should I really be asking folks. I had all my questions, right?
Yeah.
Everything was bulleted. I was ready to go, you know. And you know, we got off course, and it was the most amazing conversation. He was at Walter Reed at the time. And he had a pretty serious head trauma where a whole section of his head had been removed. His mom was there, his dad was there. He was just like really being able to get some, he had been out of the coma for not too long. And he was able to talk about that experience.
About the experience of being in the coma.
Being in the coma and coming out of the coma and what that, so they had an immersive consciousness program there where after they had trauma-induced coma, and they leave you in the coma, right? So the swelling goes down over a period of time. And coming out of the coma is a very slow process. So he became very conscious of the world and the value of the world.
So believe it or not, and I hate to do this,
No.
short, we're out of time.
That's, hey.
Yeah, so I have to encourage everyone who's watching, to go see The Falling and the Rising, November 2nd through 24th in Oak Park. What's the name of the theater again?
Park Ridge.
I'm
And
sorry,
it's
Park
Petite
Ridge.
Opera, so petiteopera.org
Okay.
is the website.
So thank you all for being
Thank
on the
you.
show. It's been wonderful. I want to thank our audience for joining us once again on Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. Please join us every Saturday night at 8 on Comcast Channel 19, or see us on the web at publicperspective.tv. That's after you look at petiteopera.org. Right? So, till next time, thank you and good night.